right, go ahead. Thank you.
Everybody's coming in. Welcome, everybody. Glad you decided to join us this afternoon for our first breakout session. I'm going to introduce our speaker and tell you a little bit about how this meeting will go today. So we are in a meeting now, not a webinar. So you are able to mute while AJ is talking and unmute if you want to ask a question later. You can also feel free to type your questions into the chat box, and I will try to watch that and ask some questions as AJ is finished presenting. Also, just want to again thank our sponsors. Someone had a question in the last session about how to thank the people who put food into the boxes that you got. Their farm logos are located in your program, so just Google them and you should be able to find their contact information. They would love to get thank yous from all of us, I'm sure. So we are here today to learn about product pricing and budgeting. Hopefully that'll be a topic that everybody has some interest in and probably some input to at the end. But AJ Granelli is going to join us to talk about that topic today. AJ was born and raised in New York State and has lived in Western South Dakota on the Pine Ridge Reservation since 2013. He's a former high school algebra teacher and a current owner of Homegrown Pork and Poultry near Batesland, South Dakota. Homegrown Pork and Poultry is a small farm selling direct to consumer, pasture-raised pork, chicken, and turkey, as well as seasonal produce. So I'm going to turn this over to AJ and let him give us some good tips about pricing and budgeting. Welcome, AJ.
Thanks, Carrie. Good afternoon. I can't see everybody, but I'm sure that you're all there. Well, I got a good introduction there. I suppose that I should just kind of open up my presentation and go from there. I've got a little bit background of who I am, and then I guess we'll get started. Let's see. Go. Okay. Screen sharing. Let's see. There we go. Okay, we're good.
Got it. Yep, good job.
All right. So today, obviously, you all signed in this because you were aware that we were going to talk about creating a budget for small enterprises, and with that budget, strategies on how to price your products. So just to start off, a little bit about me. I guess that we kind of went over that. Thanks, Carrie. So I can move through this. I grew up in New York State. Minimal experience in agriculture prior to coming to South Dakota. I did work in horticulture for about 12 years. I managed nursery and a greenhouse in Rhode Island and Connecticut for a while. Then I became a teacher, and as the little bolt says there, in 2015, my neighbors and I, we lived way out in the country. We were renting some property on a big ranch, and we bought 20 broilers and raised them out, and we had a blast doing it. And we got all our friends to come over and help butcher. It took all day to do the 18 birds that lasted. And from there, I was just kind of hooked. Some of the neighbors wanted to buy some, so I used the money that we sold to buy some more birds. And then at the end of the season, I had enough money to buy a couple pigs, raise those, sold them. And so essentially, the way that I've operated my business is from scratch, zero. The way I like to describe it is turning over the engine. So I put in a certain amount of money. I make a certain amount of return. I use that to expand the size. So like Harry said, I spent 6 years in the classroom. I was an algebra and geometry teacher. And then I, along with some other folks, we put together a large Department of Education grant and started a alternative high school. So right now, full-time is Homegrown Pork and Poultry for me, right outside of Bates in South Dakota. We do pork and poultry essentially. And before we really get into this, I want to stress that I am not an accountant. I am not a business expert, but these are strategies from reading and learning on what I have put together. A lot of times it feels overwhelming to dive into some of these books, and I see a lot of new producers at farmers markets, they're passing by and checking everyone else's prices and trying to figure out how they're supposed to price their product. So today we're going to just kind of break that down and rely on what you need, not what some other producer needs. So today's presentation goals, we want to be able to identify our costs and the types of costs for a small enterprise. We want to familiarize with the parts of a budget. We want to be able to write that budget. If we don't know how much we are spending to produce whatever product it may be, then we have no idea what our pricing should be. We're just guessing and relying on someone else's thoughts. So we have no idea how far that chain has gone from where you're getting pricing strategies if you don't use your own costs. So the biggest thing today I want to stress is we need to use our own costs, not someone else's. And finally, once we do identify all our costs and be able to create that budget, we will simply be able to determine a price for our product. So, enterprise budget, why do we need it? What is it? First, it's a plan, a financial plan. If you ever go to a bank and ask for money, or a lot of other avenues when you're buying land or anything, you're going to need a business plan. So you're putting together a budget as a physical document, I guess digitally, probably a lot of them, but they may get printed out as well. And it's a financial plan. It can be broken into each small enterprise. As far as I'm concerned, I've got multiple enterprises, right? Some overlap a little bit, but I need to make sure each one is working for itself. Otherwise, something is paying for something else that it doesn't need to. So a budget for your small enterprise would be a physical list and identification of all costs and revenue, and the physical list will compile the financial plan. So back to a goal without a plan is just a wish, right? We say that we want to make money. I want to raise chickens and make a profit, hopefully a living if I compile enough of my enterprises together and balance the risk. But without knowing exactly what I'm putting in, it's just a hope. So, and then this goes to if we are setting up an enterprise, it is for profit. If you are here for a hobby, then your driving factor is not to make a profit, to turn your investment around. I put $100 in, I want to make $120 back, right? I want to gain. I don't want to invest more than what it returns to me. So with an enterprise budget, you'll be able to price your products. You'll be able to help yourself obtain financing, track your practices. A lot of things fluctuate. We have all seen over the past several years, prices of things go up and down. So it's something that can constantly be updated. But once you develop a budget for any given enterprise, it can easily be shifted, tweaked, however you need. And we can also compare different enterprises with our budgets. So if I know that I am hoping to return a 20% profit on one enterprise, let's say my tomato plants, and it ends up being significantly less than that, I need to be able to compare where I want to spend my time. Do I want to spend more time on raising chickens as their better investment, or turkeys or pigs or whatever? There may be some people that are canning here, are artists, same thing. You need to be able to compare where your resources are going. Resources could be big, like large plots of land. They could be small, simple tools, or your time is a major resource as well. So let's get into the components of a budget. There are going to be fixed costs. There are going to be variable costs. There is going to be income. So what's going out are going to be the costs. What's coming in is going to be the income or revenue. And then and note that we'll have on there is our return or our profit. Again, we put in $100. We want to sell everything and have $120 left over. That's sort of idea. That $20 is our return or profit. So we're going to go over each section of this, kind of identify types of pieces that you're going to include into your budget. And at the end, I'm going to show you a few kind of brief down example budgets so you can kind of get an idea on what a simple spreadsheet would look like involving some of this stuff. So you can see some examples of your fixed costs there, but to describe it better, a lot of times they're considered overhead, things that do not change in the relation of the amount of goods that you produce. So if I have 10 acres, whether I'm growing on 1 acre or all 10, that is still the same amount of cost, my land cost, or my tractor costs X amount, $10,000, we'll say. If I use it every day or once in a while, it's still going to cost that much. Buildings, equipment, it doesn't change in relation to how much you're producing. When we are budgeting out, especially larger items, such as a tractor or other piece of equipment, a tiller, even something like that, we're going to amortize it over several years. So we spend $500. We need to budget on each round or turnover. How much is that going to be? I can use my tiller 5 years, $500. So I want to budget each year is going to be $100 sort of thing. To break that down simply, obviously we can get into this a lot deeper and more complex, but I think that we're discussing small enterprises and we'll keep it relatively simple. So as I just described, fixed costs can be divided among multiple enterprises, but they have to be paid for and accounted somewhere. If you have a piece of equipment like a tractor, that's just an easy one to go to. You're not necessarily using it all on one enterprise. This works even for people on larger operations, right? They could have a cow-calf operation and they also grow out some feeders or something like that, some steers, and those are going to be two separate. So we can figure out this percentage of the cost yearly or however you're breaking down your budget, multi-year, a few months, it's going to percentage-wise into each one of those. Now, variable costs. Variable costs are directly related to the association, to the amount of production. If I have more animals, I'm going to need more feed. So obviously the feed bill goes up. If I have more garden space to take care of, labor is going to increase. Seeds, fertilizer. If you have a small canning business where you're selling jellies and things, obviously you need more jars if you're going to produce more. So they're directly related. As you increase production of your marketable product, your variable costs will go up. Variable costs are almost always inputs. Therefore, variable costs are determined by a simple formula. The cost of input per unit. So we'll say animal feed. If I am spending 20 cents per pound, and for every 100 pounds, then I'm going to spend $20, right? So the cost of input per unit times the total units is your variable cost for any one category that you're looking at. Example, $5 per packet of seeds times 20 packets planted is $100. If you only planted one packet, your cost will only be $5. So variable costs. Let's see. Our income, revenue, return, and profit. These are pretty self-explanatory. This is what we all want to get to, right? Whole nother topic would be how to get that income or where we're marketing or how we're selling. But right now we are just going to use this as numbers. So gross, a lot of people have trouble with gross and net. Gross is before your expenses, net is after your expenses. We use gross income to determine our total profit. Our variable based on selling price per unit of product. Our gross revenue is going to be our average selling price times the units of marketable product. So marketable product would be your your jar of jelly. I sell them $10 each, right? So times that is going to be our gross revenue before our expenses. We'll utilize our cost calculations to determine the price. So we're kind of going to go back and forth. First, we need to develop all our costs, see how much it costs to produce each unit, and then we're going to divide to what a lot of people call a break-even point, something like that. Our net revenue is going to be their total gross revenue minus our total costs. Total costs are the fixed and variable costs. So identifying costs. Nothing is without costs. That's, well, duh, right? It's easy to say, but all the time I see people saying, oh, but this is already paid for, or it cost me nothing to do this. I went and picked apples out of my apple tree. There is cost there. Oftentimes people are considering their labor not a cost. I think that a lot of us are involved in growing food for our community, and that's an important job, and we deserve to be paid for our time, right? Every other business is going to be expected to pay for time, so why should you not as well? And it's not fair to yourself and other producers when you don't consider your input and time. You also drive yourself crazy. You'll end up working 1 million hours a week and not accounting for how much you're getting in return. Continue to identify costs. So we're going to just talk about some of these already paid for. It cost me nothing. Everything costs something. So something that is already paid for, it will have a useful lifetime. That is, there are very rarely is there something that can be used forever. So a small example that I have here, I know that I use approximately 20 small chicken waterers in my brooder every year. I know that they don't all last a whole season. Usually I have to buy, about 5 new ones at cracks and this and that, people that are working for me, things happen, you know what I mean? So in my budget, I will account for $60 per year for every 1,000 chickens that I raise to make sure that I can be purchasing waterers. It works out so that essentially I have new waterers every 4 years, sort of thing. So that's how we amortize through several years and kind of break down. Cost me nothing to resources paid by other enterprises or somewhere else will take your time. Your time is not free. Even that apple tree that's been in the yard for 100 years, if you lost that, what would it cost to replace? So we need to think about how we're going to break that down. And that is your labor. Labor should always be at the high end of expected. Anybody that works from home or on your own operation knows that everything takes longer than you expected. There's lots of good apps out there that you can track your time on different tasks. And oftentimes you will be surprised how much time you actually do put in. There's lots of, with running multiple enterprises or a small business, there is plenty of things behind the scene that you feel are added on, whether you're doing accounting or whether you're planning something, or there's lots of things, phone calls, right? Just all the extra time needs to get accounted for somewhere. And the less you do that, the less you are being realistic with yourself. Hired labor is often costs more than just an hourly wage. I tried to hire some high school kids here and there, but everybody knows that less experienced workers are probably also going to cost in other ways. So think about that. Where is a realistic? If I'm paying $15 an hour, is there going to be payroll fees and things like that, taxes that need to be paid on? So those are all costs that need to be accounted in. You have to pay yourself what you're worth. Decide what you want as an hourly wage. If you are okay with making $10 an hour, then that's what you budget in. If you need more than that, and I think that if you market your product in a way that is unique and you make your customers aware what they are purchasing, people will understand that you are trying to make a living too. None of us in the small foods world or local foods world are probably becoming millionaires, but we deserve to live as well. Track your time for, like I said, there's lots of apps out there that you can track time for chores, routine tasks, projects. This all has to go in somewhere into a budget. Now, market fluctuation on costs. I know that a lot of things fluctuate. I hear on the radio all the time, inflation, this and that, and prices up and down. And I try to look at multi-year averages on things like feed. I know that there will be a fluctuation. I can't always account for it all. For example, the ration that I used this year for growing all my chickens went up about 31% from April 1st to the last batch that I had mixed. It was on September 1st. That's a huge difference. I had budgeted somewhere in the middle. Hopefully when everything goes over, there was something that came out lower than budget or that eats into my profit really fast. So identifying fixed costs. They occur whether anything is produced or not. So you have a general liability insurance, we'll say, you have property taxes, you have rent or lease or mortgage, you have certain equipment, whether it sits parked in the garage or the shed or used, more than likely you have paid for that or are paying for that. Marketing costs are not typically, they can be variable costs, but oftentimes they are a set amount. So you will budget a set amount. Some people will do a percentage of a budget, and so, but I like to consider it a fixed cost. Again, we're going to spread out larger. I'm sorry. So increased production equals increased efficiency, which is also oftentimes a reduction in cost per unit produced. Let's say I buy a new plucker, and if I pluck 100 birds, it'll cost me $10 a bird. If I eat 1,000 birds, now we're down to $1 per bird. So that increased efficiency reduces per unit. A lot of fixed costs are broken down like that. So the better you can utilize equipment or land or things like that, if we can stack enterprises on the same area, it breaks it down into smaller pieces per unit, which then lowers your price or gives you the ability for a greater profit margin. Obviously, when you are making your budget, you're going to do expected production. You're not going to go into the year saying, I have no idea how many chickens I'm going to grow. You will have an idea of what your input is going to be and your output. Example of something that can be spread over multiple enterprises is land leases or whatever land costs you have. The way that I do this, I know approximate percentage of what is going to be used for certain enterprises, and then I just put a percentage on that and break it into different budgets. So let's see, identifying variable costs or operating costs. So remember, this is directly tied to our amount of production, back to feed, bedding, supplies, packaging, labor. We want to use our expected production multiplied by our cost to determine the variable costs in an overall budget. Example being, each chicken will get 13 pounds of feed at 18 cents a pound. With an expected production of 1,000 chickens, I'll budget $2,340. I know I need that much to go into the season. That's where I will need to buy my chicken feed, right? So we're just kind of going over how to find these costs. I've got all my costs. I've got a whole list of things. Now what do? We're going to decide on our profit margin. If you put in $100, how much do you need back? You took the risk, you put in the work, you forked up the money to make the investment. You've got the skin in the game. What do you need in return? I want to make at least a 15% return on my investments. If I didn't do that, I could take my money that I do have and I could probably bring it down to a financial advisor and say, here you go. And I wouldn't have to do anything. And they would return to me in the past couple of years, probably like 10%. That sure sounds a lot easier than chasing chickens and pigs all year. So I want my investment in time and capital to be worthwhile. Again, I'll read the example. I spend $1,000 to produce 100 chickens. I want to make sure I get 15% back. 15% of the $1,000 I spent is 150. When you put it on these numbers, it does not seem like a lot, but as you compile, as you turn the engine over, as I like to say, then it slowly increases. So then we have our profit margin. We are now able to set our price. You've done all the hard work. You've documented your expenses. You have estimated the amount of production and the labor it took to get there. And now you have your product. So we're going to take our unit or our total cost of production and divide it by the number of units produced. If it costs $1,150 to produce these chickens, I guess I should have made that example 1,000, sorry. Divided by 100 gives you $11.50 minimum price per chicken. If we are going to add labor and break that up, that's going to increase, and that will be another budget. So that is our base pricing. That's what we need for our labor paid, our profit margin for our investment, and all costs covered. Are we done? Not necessarily. Your base price is the average price that you need to bring in for your enterprise to be financially viable. If we hit certain amount of efficiency, it may make sense to sell a certain percentage at a lower cost so that we can pay for most of our fixed costs. And this can be exampled in wholesale and retail. If I know I need to grow 1,000 chickens to make sure that my pluckers and scalders and equipment are paid for, perhaps 700 of those go retail right or wholesale right at or just below that base price that I came up with from our costs, and the rest will go at a retail value with an slightly increased profit margin to make sure that our total sales balances out to at least our base price. So you can continually adjust. Now, this may be a marketing decision or conversation, but prices are adjusted in businesses and stores, especially for products, that physical products that you go and buy. There's no reason we can't adjust that as well. Will your market bear an increase? So now we are talking about supply and demand. If there is no one else growing or selling pickled jalapenos in your area, can you slightly increase your profit margin because you are the only one doing that? Is your product above and beyond what a competitor is? Is your product not as high quality and needs to be lower? But you still know what your base price is. Another thing about lessening market volatility is the ability for storage. Now, that doesn't work for everything, but let's say it is much significantly less expensive for me to grow hogs during the spring and fall because they're not burning as many calories in the winter, or they're not hot in the summer, eating less. And so their conversion rates are a lot better. Now, if I can grow more in optimal times, I can store that. It's obviously storage and things like that are budgeted in, but then I can balance the budget or the pricing over the course of a year, as opposed to continually fluctuating my prices. And those are decisions that you need to make, but we still know what our base price needs to be. So this gets us, I didn't want to bring up comparative pricing because I see all the time until we are towards the end in how we price. So many people are constantly going around and asking what this price is, or I see in online groups of producers around the country that will be asking, what are you charging for your tomatoes or your chicken or whatever it may be. It does not matter what someone else is charging. I see sometimes I will look at the USDA does lots of, I believe they're weekly or possibly bi-weekly on a lot of specialty products. That is everything from pasture-raised chicken to heirloom tomatoes. And so they have those reports on average markets around the country. You can look at that to make sure that you are kind of within a range, but that doesn't mean if you're not in the range, you need to change your price. That means you need to figure out your costs to be in the range that you want to be. At farmers markets, I'll see vendors go by with their phones and kind of candidly take pictures of other people's signs, and people will be complaining that this person is selling for more, less, or they're undercutting. You will not be in business long if you don't know your costs. That is the point that I want to drive home the most today. You must know your costs. If you have found yourself doing that, it's okay. But you are probably shorting yourself. You are not, by not knowing your costs, you're not documenting what's going in. More than likely, you're spending more than you expect, and you're coming up short at the end of each month. If you have identified all your costs and you know what you need to price your product, other producers' product pricing has no bearing on what you need. Just a quick way to run it into the ground. So know your costs based on your costs and your budget, not someone else's. So a little example, we're gonna compare Mary and Leroy they're both growing tomatoes. Mary grows organically grown heirloom tomatoes. She spends $10 in seeds, 100 days to maturity. She has one plant per 3 linear feet, and she yields approximately 5 pounds of tomatoes per plant. So Mary is going to only produce 150 pounds of tomatoes. Her costs per tomato is going to be significantly more. If she tries to go over and look at Leroy's garden stand and he's selling tomatoes for $1 a pound, and she tries to price that, she actually lost money. She put in more money than she got back at the end of the year. So everyone's operation is going to be a little different. Try your best to not compare prices of what you see as competitors. You need to market yourself, your own product, and get what you need. Putting it all together. So I'm going to show you some examples of budgets. I have trimmed down these budgets a little bit, simplified, just to make things a little bit easier for everybody. And there'd be multiple pages. I have lots and lots of pages and multiple books of spreadsheets, and I didn't think it was realistic for us to do kind of like an advanced accounting class sort of thing. So we're going to look at an example budget starter for broiler chickens, has most costs in there. a small market garden example for garlic production. And then we're going to look at a budget that goes through several stages of my hog operation, kind of condensed. So what does it cost to have breeding stock? And then what does it cost to raise a feeder pig? And then what does it cost to sell that retail for me? So first, I hope that some of you are familiar with spreadsheets, if not most. This is just a quick breakdown on how I would go about planning my budget. I list off everything that I can think of that goes into the price for, or the cost to produce chickens. If you are pretty handy with Excel, you can add in calculations that are a little more advanced. So on the top right, you can see that we have our inputs of what we expect to produce. And then we have it broken down per bird, what a whole batch costs, and then what the entire season of production would cost. We've got a few notes just so you can see how I would determine some things. Example, bedding. I know that I go through 3 bricks of pine shavings for every 150 birds. That comes to 2 cents per bird at $8.50 a bag. So I have in my budget 2 cents per bird. I've calculated that by the number of birds in a batch, which will give me $4 for bedding for every 150 birds. For 1,000 birds, it's going to give me $20 cost. We did a little example on the waters and feeders. The land, I lease my property, so how much that costs. I know that a certain percentage of the land area is used by the chickens and only the chickens. Some is the turkeys cross over some area, and there's a little bit of shared space with the hogs too. Things like electricity. I know that I need to brood for an average of 16 days per batch of baby chicks that come in. I simply look at my electric bill and I determine that I'm running these many lights, I'm running this equipment, this is going to cost how much for electricity. I have kept track of my chores for my daily labor on how long it takes each day and then average that out. So when you break it all down, it takes me, we'll say 20 minutes a day to take care of 150 chickens. Now I process at 54 days. So that breaks down that each bird over its life, I spend 5 minutes per bird. I budget $25 an hour. That will cover me if I'm hiring someone to do that, or pay me, which I feel like my time is worth that. Processing, there's a whole nother spreadsheet that that breaks down on how we go into and what we get per bird to process. So all said and done, it costs in this budget $13.69 to grow 1 chicken out. That is with our fixed and variable costs put together. I know that I want a 15% profit margin. I put in this amount of money. I put in $13.69 for every chicken. So I want to make sure I get at least $2.05 back. We add that together. So with my profit margin, my base unit, my base cost per chicken is going to be $15.74. From several years experience, based on when I give the birds 13 pounds of feed and they live 54 days, we average a 4-pound carcass. So what do I need to get? $3.93 minimum per pound. And obviously we can always make this more complicated. I hope this is a start to kind of visualize what a budget can look like for you. Here's an example of garlic production. And in this budget, we're getting just a little bit more in depth by identifying what are actually variable costs and what are fixed costs. The more budgeting you can do, the better. The more breaking down of what your actual costs are, the better. So after you've done a simple budget, try to break it up and see where your costs are. What are you missing? What did you estimate or budget over for? How can that be adjusted? So on the left, I have for my 10 rows of garlic, or I guess I have this broken down per 100-foot row. What it costs to seed the garlic. I put in a cover crop, usually oats, right after we pull it out. Then we'll put in compost just before planting again in the fall. All these things are variable costs. Weeding, it's obviously going to take me X amount of time longer for 100 feet than it will for 50 feet. So that is those are labor costs in there. Fixed costs, I know that I have a tiller that I till in the cover crop with. I know that I'm going to break that down over several gardens and several years. So I need to make sure that I'm budgeting how much that costs. It was not free. It was an investment that I want to make sure I get a return on. My truck, tools, whether that be hoe, shovels, irrigation materials, things like that. Again, in here you see professional fees. So that can be like to pay my accountant at the end of the year. If I know that across all my enterprises, garlic makes up a certain percentage, I don't know exactly off the top of my head, but we'll say 15% of my revenue or income for the year, I will break down a certain percentage that goes towards that so that each enterprise is paying a small bit for every cost. So we come to a fixed cost of $48 and $284 on variable. So to grow our 27 pounds of garlic, it's going to cost, including my profit margin, $330. There next year, we'll be selling garlic at $15 a pound, it looks like. So these are the budgets that this is using our expenses to find out what we actually need. You can find varying ranges of especially produce all over the place, depending on what resource or what publication you're looking at, and say, oh, I think I'll go like that. That sounds like a fair price. Sounds like you have no idea. So these are simplified budgets, again, broken down even more, but I want to show you how we can lead multifaceted enterprises together. So my breeding stock, each sow, for those that don't raise pigs, is a mama pig. She eats about $688 worth of feed, hay, seed pasture that I seed, and my grain ration that I give them. Health expenses, whether that be deworming or in any other small thing that we may need, broken down. Infrastructure. So in that infrastructure will be like shelter, that will be water supplies, that will be feeders, things like that. So per year, I make sure that we are budgeting at least $50 per head of breeding stock in infrastructure stuff. I know I'm going to assume that the amount, or not assume, I've tracked that approximately I spend 4 hours per head of breeding stock in my labor working with the pigs. And that is broken down on multiple parts of that. So every year, it costs me $963 to have a sow or to have a boar. So that needs to go in somewhere. I'm going to use that budget to figure out how much it costs me to put a piglet on the ground. So you can see the arrow brings you up to feeder pig production. This is babies. To put a piglet on the ground, it will do approximately 70 feeders a year based on the number of sows and how we Obviously, again, I had to break this down so we didn't have 20-page books. It would have got too confusing. So we break that down and then divide by the number of breeders, feeders per breeder. So every year we need at least 14 per. So it works out that it's about 16 per sow. And then obviously we have a boar in there too. So it breaks down per head of breeding stocks, sow and boar, that we come up with 14 piglets. So I divide that expense of a breeding livestock, and to get a piglet on the ground, it is $68.79 for me. So I'm going to take that number, and when I want to grow out a pig to finish and then eventually sell pork chops and bacon and things like that, I bring that into my next enterprise. I mean, going back here, any one of these could be broken down. So if I know that I need to sell a breeder, this is how much it's going to cost. A piglet is going to cost at least this. We can figure out weeks after that how much it costs to raise continually. So my feeder pig moves down. You can see our arrow. Feed to grow out that feeder pig, labor put in, equipment, infrastructure, the grounder land, other expenses that I've condensed there. Profit margin for retail. Now at this point, in my perspective, I have taken a risk on 3 enterprises that maybe not all of them have sold outward, but they have sold within each other. So I want to hit a 25% profit margin. Do I always hit that? No. But that's what our goal is. So I need to make sure that each animal is bringing in $538. This is how this works all the way down. Or each finished pig. So then we take that's our basic animal cost. So BAC is where you see on the top line. And then we add in again to turn that animal into retail cuts. Now, if we're in the last one and we're selling a whole pig, we know where we need to be at for our average hog. Now we want to break them down and sell individual pork chops and Boston butts and things like that. So how much more am I going to have to invest in processing? How much more am I going to have to invest in transporting to a processor? Transporting home, where do I have to invest to store that product? And then again, we're putting a profit margin on our additional investment. So if you don't do that somewhere, you are losing what you deserve. You're putting out this much money. You want to make sure you're getting back that plus your desired profit margin. So as I have a pig all broken down, I know that when we total up all the pork chops and all the pieces of bacon and what those packages sell for, it needs to add up to at least $900, $909.70. That breaks down to an average pig of 674 pound. So that's what I need. I know that you can go to the grocery store and get pork for 99 cents and $2 a pound. This is what I need for my operation, and it does not matter what anyone else is selling their pigs for. That is about all that I've got today. I hope that anyone has any questions or comments. This is the first time I've done this presentation. I hope that some of you enjoyed it at least.
Thank you, AJ. I thought that was it was good to see the detail and what really goes into figuring out that break-even point, because everyone needs to do that. As much not fun as it sometimes is. I don't see any questions in the chat, but please feel free to type questions into the chat, or you can unmute yourself and ask questions. We have a little bit of time, so please ask some questions for AJ if you want.
If something comes up later, you can see my email. There's my cell phone. feel free to get in touch with me if you want to just even break it down a little farther. I'm more than happy to help anyone do that. But I think that we've got a pretty good basis on how to do a budget today.
I think you must have covered it really well because we don't have any questions. All right, well, there will be a little bit of time before our next session starts at 1:30. I've got about 8 minutes until then, and you're getting some thank yous in the chat, AJ. So yeah, that took some time to put together your presentation, and we really appreciate you doing that and giving everybody a good overview of budgeting and pricing. If we could clap, we would.
All right, and I'll start on introducing Bill. I guess I've signed up for the one with the easiest name. So Bill Smith is with us today. He's the director for the Division of Resource Conservation and Forestry in the Department of Ag and Natural Resources. And today he's here to tell us about the Specialty Crop Block Program and just reach out to some specialty crop producers about this opportunity. With that, Bill, when you are ready, thank you. During his conversation, if you have any questions, throw them in the chat. And then when Bill gets to the point that he's ready for them, I will make sure that he hears your question. Thanks.
That sounds good. Thank you. I'm loading right now. Can everyone see my title slide?
Looks good.
Okay, thanks. Again, this is Bill Smith. I'm the division director for the Division of Resource Conservation and Forestry inside the South Dakota Department of Ag and Natural Resources. My division has oversees the Specialty Crop Block Grant Program, and we're excited to provide the group with an overview. Some of the folks who are attending are probably already familiar with the program, but for those of you who aren't, hopefully this will provide you with some opportunities and some additional thoughts. So just a little bit of background on our program. We have our coordinator, Nicole Prince Edwards, is currently overseeing the program. However, she's taken a job with another organization, and she's agreed to fill in part-time for us until we get our new coordinator on board. Our new coordinator will start November 29th. His name is Timothy Schoenhoven. And Timothy has a background working with USDA programs. So, and Timothy, I know, is very eager to hit the ground running. So we will have some overlap between Timothy and Nicole. And that'll be excellent because Timothy will be able to kind of capture some of Nicole's knowledge as well as integrate himself into some of those networks that Nicole's developed. So when he's on board and has an active email address, we'll start getting that out to some of our folks that we've worked with on this program. So with that, I'll kick things off. You know, again, specialty crop have a wide variety of definitions, and let's see if my next slide, there it goes. And I've gone to my next slide. I know I'm assuming it went to the next slide. So if there's any problems, just let me know, throw up a chat on that. But just a little bit of background on the program. You know, historically, we've received the annual funding through the Farm Bill. This last fiscal year, we received just a little over $400,000 in funds through the Farm Bill. And those funds are good for 3 years. The end date on that for the 21 funding, of course, is the end of September 2024. But this year, we also received some additional funding through the stimulus, through some of the stimulus funding through House. So that funding was actually a little higher than what our normal funding would be. So we received another little over $500,000 in stimulus funds, and those we have 4 years to get those out there. So it's a little bit different as far as funds available goes for a specialty block grant this year. So more than double the funding, and then the second pot of funding, we have another year to spend it versus the traditional funding. So Now, this is kind of where one of the basis things is what is a specialty block grant, and there is a definition, and I've got that in the slide to click on. But kind of in short, it's basically any one of those kind of plant-based items that's not a standard commodity crop in the Farm Bill. Good examples are fruits and vegetables, nuts, various horticulture, nursery crops, plants that are cultivated and used for food, medicinal purposes, or other aesthetic purposes. And there's a definition of with processed products in there too. But basically, one area, I'll give you a little example where there's a little bit of an overlap with the commodity crops is sunflower oil is considered a specialty crop, but not sunflower seed. So I would encourage everybody on this presentation, and I assume these presentations will be made available, but if they're not, we've got the definition out on our website. So
Yep,
with that,
it will be recorded and available for attendees.
what, pardon?
These are being recorded and will be available for attendees to watch again.
Perfect. So I won't click on the website. I know sometimes in PowerPoint, when you click on websites, it can get a little bit weird. So I want to keep it nice and simple. Now, the application process we developed in South Dakota, we do have where we get input from our stakeholders regarding setting our state priorities. And I'll get into kind of the federal priorities and how we select those priorities a little later in my presentation. But we send out a survey, and we do that through SurveyMonkey every January to get some feedback on setting priorities. We also do a press release in January to request applications. And in March, there's a USDA press release that's issued out that describes how much funding is available to the states for the program. In April, and you kind of can see how we have it broken apart here, but in April, we have our applications are due into the state. So basically middle of January, we're requesting applications, are due in by April. We have a state review panel who reviews these applications and scores them. And we do have an option to meet with applicants in case there's some questions on their applications or they need to provide additional information. And then this gives us enough time to go in there and make changes. Our whole point is to try to make sure to help folks with the application process and make sure they have an opportunity the best opportunity possible to get their proposals funded. In May, we have to submit a plan to USDA. And basically we have to put all of the applications in one package to send in. And the award starts the end of September, and none of the projects can start prior to the end of September. So if you're doing a new application and you want to get things going in August, we really can't pay for that type of stuff until it's after September 30th for a new grant. So one of the questions we've gotten from people in the past is what type of projects are eligible or not eligible applicants, because we do get some groups that periodically want to apply that aren't eligible for that. And a good example with that would be other state agencies or other government agencies. I mean, the specialty block grant is targeted towards producers and targeted towards groups who work with producers. So of course, the primary group that we work with are producer groups, like the Specialty Producers Association, South Dakota Hop Growers are another group we work with, as well as individual producers. Some of these specialty crops are are fairly small and targeted. So there's really no producer group for those yet. So individuals can apply. We do have it, groups, trade associations are also eligible. And, you could make an argument that some of the grower groups are really trade associations, but both groups are eligible. So we don't have to get into that fine of resolution to make that determination between producer and trade association. But they're both eligible. Nonprofits are also eligible, although we don't have very many of those that have applied in South Dakota. I do believe in other states, numerous nonprofits have applied and received funds. And here in South Dakota, we have had a few colleges and universities like South Dakota State, South Dakota School of Mines, and Western Dakota Tech have also applied for funds. So again, they try to cast the net pretty broadly for eligibility for the program, trying to get a lot of interest in it. It's designed to be flexible, and those groups are defined in the Farm Bill. So if at some time there needs to be a change in that, it would have to be addressed during the Farm Bill process. Now, earlier I mentioned the priorities and that we doing a poll to express which are our 3 priorities for the year, and the state selects the priorities. Now, through that survey process I mentioned earlier in my presentation, what this doesn't mean, let's say one of your priorities isn't one of the top 3s. It doesn't mean you're not ineligible. It just means you'll get fewer points when it comes scoring, and if funding is a little tighter, you might be either not selected for funding or for reduced funding. So those who address all 3 priorities are of course going to get a little higher consideration for funding. These do change from year to year depending on what the recommendations of that survey and the stakeholder groups are. And these 8 priorities are set in the Farm Bill. So all the states have these different outcomes or priorities to choose from, and they select their top 3. Of course, one of the things that's been very popular in South Dakota has been outcome 1, which is enhancing the competitiveness of specialty crops through increased sales. And I will note in there, you can see on the slide, there is a footnote on there that this is required for all marketing projects to basically show that the increased sales. Outcome 2 wasn't one that was selected this year, but it is in there. Is enhancing competitiveness through increased consumption. Outcome 3 this year was one of our priorities, enhancing competitiveness of specialty crops through increased access. And what that increased access means is both market access as well as access to the consumer to that particular product. Outcome 4 is deals with excuse me. Outcome 4 deals with the competitiveness of specialty crops through greater sustainability of practices, a tie to the increasing yields, reducing inputs, increasing efficiency, increased economic return, or conservation of resources. And outcome 4 was very popular this year too, being one of our top 3 ones, basically being able to produce more crops more efficiently with less inputs. So outcome 5, the enhanced competitiveness of specialty crops through sustainable and diverse and resilient crop systems was an outcome that hasn't been selected here in South Dakota, but I'm sure other states That's a pretty important concern, which is why it made the Farm Bill list. Outcome 6, enhancing competitiveness of specialty crops through increased number of viable technologies to improve for food safety. Again, it didn't make our priority list this year, but doesn't mean it can't make it in future years. And I realize there's people on the phone, so I thought it'd be best to more or less read these for those people on the phone to benefit. Enhance the competitiveness is outcome 7, enhance the competitiveness of specialty crops through increased understanding of ecological threats to food safety from microbiological sources and chemical sources. And outcome 8 is enhance the competitiveness of specialty crops through enhanced or improved economies as a result of specialty crop development. So those are your 8 priority outcomes in the Farm Bill. And this year in South Dakota, we selected outcome 1, 3, and 4. So now, the types of projects, again, tie in with the priorities that I talked about earlier. I know this particular year, there's been a lot of discussion tied to COVID impacts. And one of the things that, ties in this year were projects that specifically responded to COVID-19 impacts, but generally these still are applicable all years. And I apologize for the wrapping on this slide. It looked pretty good in the preview panel, but it wrapped a little weird. So I'll fix it before we put it up on put it in the archives. But those projects that are for the Farm Bill funding are enhanced food safety, improving capacity of all entities in the distribution chain to respond with the requirements of the Food Safety Modernization Act. For example, developing good ag practices, good handling practices, good manufacturing practices, and in the cost share arrangements for funding audits of such systems for small farmers, packers, and processors. Again, the program was designed to be targeted towards small scale producers, investing in specialty crop research, which also would include research on focus on conservation and environmental outcomes, developing new and improved seed varieties and specialty crops, pest control and disease control, increased child and adult nutrition knowledge and consumption of specialty crops, improved efficiency and reducing cost of distribution systems, and sustainability. So couple other items of important to note. Most of you who are familiar with, who've dealt with different Farm Bill programs such as Environmental Quality Incentive Program, or EQIP, or the Conservation Stewardship Program, or CSP, or even the Conservation Reserve Program. Most of those, well, all those programs require some kind of a local cost share and non-federal funds. A specialty crop block grant is a little unique in that way. It's because it's 100% federally funded, and that funding goes through the states and not through you to the producers, not directly from USDA to the producers. And because it's federally funded, there's no match requirement. You are allowed to utilize and combine different sources of funding with specialty crop block grant. But one of the things in the application process, and this is a national federal requirement, those need to be identified in there. And that's important because when you go to discuss funding for programs and Congress is looking at these programs, they like to know where all the money's coming from on these programs. And it really helps sell a program if you can show the amount of local and other funds coming into a program. So it really helps with selling the program to those decision makers at the federal level Program income, and this is also unique too, because in many federal programs, program income is not allowed, but in the specialty crop block grant program, it is allowed. It does need to be identified in the application, and any program income must be put back into the project and reported on the financial reports. These, much like several other federal programs, there are a 3-year period of performance in a specific grant. And like other federal programs, so there's some things where it's like and a little bit unique, but like other federal programs, annual performance and financial reports are due at the beginning of November each year. So again, that also is one of those accountabilities that are reported on programs. So the folks at the decision-making level know how the funds are being spent and if they're being spent consistent with the program funds. So much like any other program, there's a fair amount of documents that are required. However, the process itself, it's not excessively document heavy, but if you're not used to some of these, it can be, and that's something that we can help out with people who are new to applying for the process. If they need some examples or need some assistance in putting an application together, we can certainly help with that. On my slide, I've got the required documents that need to be filed, and again, for the benefit of the folks on the phone, I'll just read through these really quick. We do have a application template that's available in Word, and if somebody has a computer that's not capable of using Word or something, and they just want to print it out blank application and handwrite it in and submit it that way to us, we could certainly help them with getting it into Word so it can be submitted, because we have to submit these on to the feds. We're more than happy to do that. The application also needs a cover sheet, and that helps distinguish the applications apart. W-9 form, because there are payments involved, that W-9 form is required. There's the standard FS 424B assurances dealing with non-construction projects, which has to be completed on any federal project not involving construction. Other supporting documents that we need are letters or letters of support or other evidence of commitment by your partners and resource providers. And that can be as simple as a letter on letterhead from one of your project partners saying what resources they're going to bring to the project and when. It just shows that they're involved with the project in an official capacity. So a simple letter or some other form of documentation is required there. Now, the one thing that's required also is what they call a DUNS number. A DUNS number is required for every application, and it's a unique number established by Dun and Bradstreet Incorporated to identify organizations. And to acquire that, there's a website and there's no cost for it. I will warn you, there are some websites out there that offer to set you up a DUNS number for a fee. So if you get to one of those websites, you're not on the right website. So if you have any questions on that, I've got the website address in my presentation. And if that still doesn't work for you, just let us know. The process is usually pretty fast. 1 to 2 business days is all it takes to get a DUNS number. And you can do it by phone. And I don't have the phone number on my presentation, but we'll add that as well. If folks don't have decent internet access or seem to get the runaround from some of these pay sites, which, if you type it up in a search engine, you may route you to one of those pay sites. We'll put the phone number on there as well, so that'll be available for folks. The other thing is in addition to the DUNS number, applicants need to be registered in SAMS, which stands for System of Award Management. And basically what that is another award system registration. And in there, you need to designate a e-business point of contact. And SAMS registrations do need to be updated annually and active, and always maintained for any active award or application under consideration. So that I know it can be a little confusing that you have to go in and get a DUNS number and be registered at SAMS, but we do. It is a federal requirement, and again, if there's people out there who have questions on that or need some assistance, they can call our office, and our office would be more than willing to help you walk you through the process. So a couple other resources that are out there. There is some federal training and that's available through grants.gov. There is a federal specialty crop block grant program website, and that's provided on my slide, as well as the place to get the DUNS number. There's also some information on the specialty block grant program through the Farm Bill, as well as our Danner website, where it's an active link for you to click on the program. And that'll be where we put all of our contact information, as well as what's going on for the current year. And again, we do a press release when we're ready to do a call for applications. So, I know we had an hour scheduled, but wanted to leave a lot of time for questions. I know it's a Friday as well, so there's a lot of folks who are, we're in the middle of the conference, so we don't want to burn you out with too much too fast. But again, our contact information is right here. This is our central number in resource conservation and forestry. That number will that'll be the correct number when Timothy starts and Nicole's done. So if you folks have any questions on the program, would like additional information, feel free to give us a call at that number. So with that,
If anyone has any questions that they want to put in the chat, you can click the to everyone and then we can all view it. Or if you want it to be an anonymous question, you can just directly send it to myself, Laura Kaler, and then I will make sure that Bill hears it. So we'll give it 2 minutes for questions. Thank you, Bill. It was very informative. So the question that just came in was, can you give examples of successful applicants and what projects they are doing?
I'll take that one.
I can.
I do have Nicole Edwards here with me too, and I will actually turn the mic over to Nicole for that one.
Good afternoon. What was the question again?
Can you give examples of successful applicants and projects they are doing?
I mean, we have several successful applicants. Obviously, the South Dakota Specialty Producers Association is an applicant in this program as well. And you guys are very successful with these grant funds. We have individual producers that have projects anywhere from peas to hops and frozen hops, to wineries, and that are all very successful. And the success rate is based on what your outcome that you want to come from your application is, because you can do research, you can have a specific outcome that you're going to build on, or those types of things. So we have a lot of universities, SDSU, the School of Mines, Western Dakota Tech. Western Dakota Tech is actually doing an application or doing a project right now that they're developing criteria, curriculum for a specialty crop in there. We have a school district, Hovind School District, I believe it is, that is doing ag in the classroom, that they are bringing curriculum into the classroom with specialty crops. So they actually have curriculum that they're building on, that they plan on distributing to other districts to use as well. We have a group in Cheyenne River Reservation that is doing a community garden, and then they take that and do outreach to teach youth better ways and decisions of consuming healthy specialty crops that can be grown right with their native soils. So I hope that helps.
Thanks. Any more questions?
And then also, just while we're waiting, on that link with the specialty crop, the USDA link, there is a link of all of the applications that have been submitted for the last, I believe, 10 years for every state. So you can go back and look and see examples of everybody else's projects. It looked like there was a question about what the grant amounts range from. And the grant amounts that we have range, and we haven't set a cap on any of them, other than the team generally will not award one grant with all of our grant funding. So if your application comes in requesting all of the funding that we've been allocated, they'll generally ask you to trim that down some. But they range anywhere from $4,500 to $100,000 and everywhere in between.
Any more questions? Can you talk about the funding nationally?
Yes and no. I mean, that's a pretty wide question. So the funding is allocated coming out of the Farm Bill. It's allocated to each state. And March of every year, we generally get a press release indicating how much funds have been allocated to each state from the Farm Bill. My understanding is that they have, based off of data of specialty crops grown in the states, is based off how much funding each state gets. I know that they're looking at revising that, but I do not have any updates of if that's moving forward or not. So that's about all I know based on the national funding.
Any more questions? You can put them in the chat, or you can unmute yourself and just ask as well. Okay, if not, Nicole, do you mind putting Bill's email in the chat box so people can send questions directly to him if they have them?
Absolutely.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
So that will wrap up this session. The next time that the group meets back is at 4 o'clock for breakout session. So I hope you're able to join us for that. If for some reason this is the last session that you're participating in for the conference, please complete the eval. And otherwise, we will see you at 4 o'clock Central, 3 o'clock Mountain. Thank you. And thank you, Bill, very much for explaining the grant project.
Thank you. You're welcome. Appreciate the time.